NASA scientist speaks out, there's someone else on the moon. What did I just say? I said. NASA scientist speaks out, there's someone else on the moon. Ever since the Freedom of Information Act was created, people have become aware that not all what goes on behind the scenes is made public. We are talking about the numerous discoveries that have been made throughout the years and have been kept safely away from society. One of the best comments about this secrecy was made by Neil Armstrong when he said that there are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of the truth's protective layers. Source. The Freedom of Information Act allows full or partial disclosure of highly classified previously unreleased information and archives controlled by the government of the United States of America. In the last couple of years, a number of scientists working for NASA have come forward speaking about Earth's moon and the mysteries associated with it. For example, George Leonard, a NASA scientist in charge of photo analysis, obtained several extremely controversial images from the moon, published in his book called Somebody Else is on the Moon. Even though the images featured in the book are of a relatively poor quality and small size, they display some incredible features of original massive prints belonging to NASA. To back his claims up, Leonard even published the identifying code numbers belonging to the original images in his work. However, this was still not enough to say for certain whether or not the images are real, and the poor quality of the images makes it even harder to believe. However, what is perhaps even more interesting than the images and their respective identification codes are the statements made by Leonard and his verified NASA credentials. Leonard was yet another NASA employee who had spoken out about what was found on the moon, which is seen in some of the images taken during the Apollo missions. In his book, Leonard argues that NASA has known about extraterrestrial activity on the moon and have ever since attempted to hide the information from the general public. Leonard wasn't the only one to make such claims. Read the books, read the lore, start to understand what has really been going on, because there is no doubt that we are being visited. The universe that we live in is much more wondrous, exciting, complex and far-reaching than we were ever able to know up to this point in time. Mankind has long wondered if we're alone in the universe. But only in our period do we really have evidence. No, we're not alone. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, SCD, former NASA astronaut and the sixth man to walk on the moon. In 1979, Maurice Chatelain, former chief of NASA Communications Systems, confirmed that Armstrong had indeed reported seeing two UFOs on the rim of a crater. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, he revealed, but nobody has talked about until now. According to Armstrong, unofficially, we were warned away. I cannot go into details, except to say that their ships were far superior to ours both in size and technology. They were great, and threatening. Many people firmly believe that not all of the images released by NASA are the actual originals taken on the moon, and many believe this is because the original images of the moon reveal structures and artifacts that would cause pandemic among the general public. Many believe that there are hundreds of images from NASA that have been altered in order to hide structures, moon bases, and artifacts that prove there is an alien presence on the moon. NASA scientists Dr. Farouk Elbaz described this the best way possible when he stated that not every discovery has been announced to the public. In addition to Leonard and several former astronauts who have spoken out about alien life, another interesting claim comes from Dr. John Brandenburg, who was the deputy manager of the Clementine mission to the moon. The mission discovered water at the moon's poles in 1994. Source. In an interview, Dr. Brandenburg, who spoke out about the fact that life on Mars existed in the distant past, said the following. It was the Clementine mission, a photo reconnaissance mission basically to check out if someone was building bases on the moon that we didn't know about. Were they expanding them? Of all the pictures I've seen from the moon that show possible structures, the most impressive is a picture of miles-wide rectilinear structure. This looked unmistakably artificial, and it shouldn't be there. As somebody in the space defense community, I look on any such structure on the moon with great concern because it isn't ours. There's no way we could have built such a thing. It means someone else is up there. Source: Dr. Brandenburg made extremely interesting statements about Mars when he said that there is enough evidence to prove that at least 2 major nuclear blasts went off on the surface of the red planet in the distant past. The theory proposed by Dr. Brandenburg is based on the traces of uranium and thorium that have been registered on the surface of Mars. This Martian civilization was wiped out by another hostile alien race from elsewhere in the universe. Dr. Brandenburg warns that our civilization could face the same fate. All of the above statements are clear indications of one thing: extraterrestrial contact, on a global scale, is inevitable. Officially, NASA and scientists around the globe have spoken out about aliens, and how they expect we will discover signs of extraterrestrial life in the next 20 years or so. However, many people believe these statements are a mere preparation for a disclosure movement that is going to change everything we believed about mankind, our origin, and life in the universe. Astronaut Gordon Cooper says aliens are here. To many UFO enthusiasts, Gordon Cooper is a legend. An original Mercury astronaut, he was one of those clear-eyed, ambitious, optimistic, straight-arrow Americans with the right stuff, as Tom Wolfe put it, men who made the U.S. space program synonymous with success and national pride. But unlike most of his fellow astronauts, Gordon Cooper has said for decades that he believes at least some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Astronaut Gordon Cooper says, "Aliens are here." To many UFO enthusiasts, Gordon Cooper is a legend. An original Mercury astronaut, he was one of those clear-eyed, ambitious, optimistic, straight-arrow Americans with the right stuff, as Tom Wolfe put it, men who made the U.S. space program synonymous with success and national pride. But unlike most of his fellow astronauts, Gordon Cooper has said for decades that he believes at least some UFOs are alien spacecraft. With the assistance of a mutual friend, I met Gordon Cooper at his office in Van Nuys, California on February 8. He isn't as big as I expected, neither in height nor build. In retrospect, it occurs to me that large size would be no asset in the space program. At 68, he is balding. He still has the signature grin, toothy and slightly cockeyed. He has sharp blue eyes. He speaks quietly, clearly, and concisely. We simply pulled up a few chairs around his desk and started talking. I said I had enjoyed Dennis Quaid's film portrayal of Cooper in The Right Stuff and asked how he had liked it. "I liked it. He did a pretty good job," he said. "So did you think of yourself as a hot dog back then?" I asked. "Yes, I guess so." We talked about the space program. He had gone up in Mercury 9 in May 1963 and completed 22 orbits, an American record at the time. Then in August 1965, he went up again in Gemini 5 with Charles Pete Conrad and stayed aloft 8 days, going 122 orbits, a world record. They had purposely set out to get ahead of the Soviets in at least a symbolic way. It was a turning point in the space race. We were already headed for the moon. We got there. The Soviets never did. Cooper was going to go to the moon, but Alan Shepard went instead, and then the Apollo program was cancelled. Cooper was going to go to Mars, too. Few Americans even know that NASA was well along on plans for a manned Mars mission, with a landing projected for 1981. Cooper was in line for commander of the mission. It would have been a nuclear-powered spacecraft, assembled in Earth orbit after parts were sent aloft on a series of Saturn 1Bs. The nuclear engines were ready, Cooper said. A lot of the spacecraft was ready. They were still working on the lander, he said, and then that program was cancelled, too. By Senator Proxmire. The worst enemy America ever had, Cooper said. I asked him about his famous UFO sighting. It was in 1951 over Germany. He and several other pilots were flying F-86 jets. We were supersonic, barely, he said, when they looked up and saw what appeared to be a large group of double lenticular-shaped aircraft, classic flying saucers, flying in formation. He said these craft were much higher than his plane could go, though he couldn't tell how high. They were going faster too, though he couldn't tell how much faster. Over the next 2 or 3 days, he and other pilots saw several hundred of these craft. Cooper said they flew formation maneuvers very much like his own squadron would fly. He and the other witnesses were uniformly convinced they were seeing a technology that wasn't human. Cooper and his fellow pilots reported the sightings to their superiors. In due course, the official explanation was relayed back down. High-flying seed pods. Though the UFO subject frequently must endure strange episodes of official denial and obfuscation, this offering of seed pods in answer to Cooper's sighting struck me as one of the wackiest I've heard. You knew this was crazy, I said to him. How could you put up with it? His answer was simple. I was in the Air Force. I wanted to fly. But Cooper had already made up his own mind that UFOs represented visitations from elsewhere, and in time he made his position clear. He wrote a letter to the United Nations in 1978. It said, in part, I do believe UFOs exist and that the truly unexplained ones are from some other technically advanced civilization. I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets, which are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth. I feel that we need to have a top-level, coordinated program to scientifically collect and analyze data from all over the Earth concerning any type of encounter, and to determine how best to interface with these visitors in a friendly fashion. Cooper was convinced by 1978 that these visitors, most of them at least, were friendly. He holds to that view today. I asked him if he ever saw anything otherworldly while he was in space. Nothing, he said. Did the other astronauts, any of them, see anything? I don't think so, he said. How about on the moon? Anything at all? Nothing on the moon, he said. I was surprised. I said that most researchers in this field are sure that someone in government knows a lot more than they're saying. He agreed. So how can we get the truth to come out, I asked. I think that's pretty much up to them, the aliens, he said. They seem to show themselves when and where and to whom they want. I wish they would pick some people who really want to meet them, instead of a couple of fishermen in Pascagoula, Mississippi, referring to the famous 1973 abduction of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. Would you want to meet them, Gordon, I asked. Heck yes, he said. I'd give them a good welcome. I told him I didn't think we had to wait for the aliens to begin discussing the truth about what is known. Didn't the government already have a lot of information? What about Roswell, for example? Well, I'm pretty sure something was picked up at Roswell. What about bodies? Maybe, yes. But I think there were better ones than Roswell, he said. We got some live ones. Live ones? Live aliens? Of course one hears all the rumors and wild tales. Did Gordon know for sure that there were some live aliens? I knew a guy who brought one in, he said. What? Brought one in? What did that mean, exactly? It was back in the mid-1950s, at White Sands Proving Ground in the middle of the New Mexico desert. His friend Gordon called him Moser, and said that Moser had passed away just a few years ago, was a rocket scientist. He was working by himself on a rocket engine test bed, getting ready for a test the next day. Suddenly, without warning, he heard a voice say his name. He didn't know where it came from. He looked around, saw no one. The voice said his name again. Then the voice said, "Don't worry, I'm above you in a craft a few miles up." Gordon said the voice belonged to a person who wanted Moser to provide lots of basic information about Earth and humans, so that this visitor could begin to adjust to living here. An arrangement was struck whereby Moser would bring the visitor library books, the visitor would read them at incredible speed, then Moser would go get some more. On more than one occasion, Moser went aboard the visitor's craft. The visitor looked human enough to pass on the street, but he was not used to Earth gravity and had a hard time breathing our air. It took him 5 years to acclimate to Earth conditions. Then he started living on the surface. Moser stayed in close touch with him. I asked Gordon if he ever met the visitor. No, I hinted around again and again, but Moser never introduced us. Where is the visitor now? Gordon said he doesn't know. The visitor learned to blend into human society and became a businessman, Moser said. Why was the visitor here? Gordon said Moser told him the visitor's people had been in space a long time. They were a very old race, and their planet had died when their sun died. They didn't want to invade or change our society. They just wanted to live on solid ground. Earth took some getting used to, but Moser's visitor friend had adjusted well. Presumably there were many others, but Gordon didn't claim to know about that. There had been another opportunity for him to meet aliens, but it fell through, he said. It was in 1972 or 1973, just after he left the space program. He was in touch with a group of people who were making contacts at Giant Rock in the Mojave Desert of California. There was to be an arrangement whereby Gordon and a small group of others could attend one of these contact events and even record it on film. The day before the scheduled event, there was a preliminary meeting where something went wrong. Gordon said he wasn't there and doesn't know exactly what happened, but it resulted in canceling the next day's event. He had assumed he would see one or more craft and alien occupants up close, in daylight. He says he never saw any such thing. But he speaks as one who knows to his own satisfaction, at least that a variety of alien types are visiting the Earth. He says he's convinced that most of them are benevolent, although some may be unfriendly or even dangerous. He didn't seem too concerned about the negative types. I asked him if he thought there had been any technology transfer. He said it was quite possible that the story told by Bob Lazar about saucers at a secret base in Nevada was true, and that wreckage had probably been recovered at Roswell and elsewhere. I asked him if he thought the rumors about a landing at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico were true, and he said he thought perhaps they were. Having previously learned of Gordon's friendly relations with the black world of super-secrecy, one of his business partners was formerly a top official in the Lockheed Skunk Works, and Gordon has worked from time to time with various intelligence agencies, including the CIA. I have to assume that he knows far more than he would ever divulge to me, particularly in this kind of get-acquainted conversation. Nonetheless, I found him remarkably open and willing to make quite amazing assertions. I'm convinced he really believes that aliens are here. That being the case, I'm glad he also seems convinced that most of our alien visitors are friendly.